Hello, hello. Skeptics and Seekers Shorts. Um, this is a sad one. So I'm not. This is not Schadenfreude. Not exactly. It's uncomfortable to me bec- because I do polemic, and some of that polemic is straightforwardly Schadenfreude. You know, I've been telling you about this cult as someone who lived most of his life on the inside of it. And bad things happen uh, sometimes, but they don't happen in the same way that, sometimes you're just headed to Central Park and you get hit by a van. I don't mean like that. Because in general, there are measures taken by everybody to make sure that bad things don't happen. Sometimes they do because we're a lot of people and people are going to people. Religion is different in that the bad things are built into the process. It's because of what religion is and how religion is done that certain bad things happen. So it's not a bad thing despite the religion. It's a bad thing because of the religion. And today is a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So I want to say that up front, and I just I'm not asking to be excused. My behavior is not going to be great. And I encourage anyone who finds my behavior and tone to be out of bounds to come to the board, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, and say so. It's fine. I take criticism actually a lot better than you think. I get plenty of it. um, because you might be right this time. You may not get any pushback from me at all. But I'm of two minds, and one of them is unworthy. And I can't help that. I could pretend to be what I am not, but I'm not. So I'm probably going to do some mockery at a thing that is very sad and tragic. But the thing that I'm mocking is not the sad and tragic thing. It's the process. It's the religious part that made this happen. That's a really fine line to walk, and a very wise and reasonable person wouldn't try to walk it. But that guy wouldn't show himself on a show like this. And so you've got me. So I'm gonna try to read this whole thing. I'm gonna make the screen a little bit bigger. All right. In October of 2000, should I read the title first? This is Hermit Meta's Friendly Atheist. You know it's going to be terrible, right? Cuss Meta. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Pastor faces manslaughter charge after man dies. Wait for it. After man dies in baptism gone wrong. Now I've got to tell you, I've heard a lot of really bad stories. This headline, though, takes me into a territory that, in my many years in church, I have not heard. I've not been here. I've not felt this particular feeling because this story is fucking bonkers. So we're gonna read it. I'm gonna say some inexcusable things that I hope that you excuse because hopefully you know my heart. I'm talking like a Christian. It doesn't matter what my heart is. If I say unconscionable things, I should be called out for it. Like for instance, if I say that we're going to commit genocide on a people such that they will never recover from it. It'll be wiped from existence. If I ever say that, uh, you should not forgive it, and you should never listen to another show that I do. So they're unconscionable things that people say that they probably shouldn't be forgiven for, and I'm going to be walking a line that I'm very bad at walking today. All right, here we go. With all that said, and I am very sorry for this man and his family. A live streamed ritual meant to save a man's soul exposed stunning negligence and a fatal lack of oversight. In October of 2023, a man named Robert Yap, also known as Robert Smith, this takes me out of the article just a moment because it just makes me ask the question that really doesn't matter. What, Robert Yap or Robert Smith? Which one is it? Is one a nickname? I don't, because the way this is written, it almost sounds like Robert Smith is the nickname. Mr. Yap, I feel like there's some context being missed here. And yeah, if I'm focusing on this really weird detail, it's because Meta, normally a very, very good, very, very clear writer. And also, I just want to avoid the details of the story. But I'm gonna get on with it. Who had Parkinson's disease, traveled hundreds of miles to Erdington, Birmingham, in England, to get baptized. This also takes me to yet another unimportant detail that I can't help but raise. I know that England, the UK, is not really a Christian nation anymore. But did you really have to travel hundreds of miles, as this says, hundreds of miles to be baptized? For real? I don't, there's something about that, the framing of this, once again, having been in the church and understand water baptism rituals very well, having performed them. I you see, you have to understand, I come from a version of the cult that believes that water baptism by immersion is necessary for salvation. But in my defense, I only believed that because Jesus said it. So, I mean, what am I going to do? It seemed to be a thing that was backed up by scripture, and all of the back and forth nonsense about, yeah, but is it really required? I mean, faith is what's required, not works, and blah, 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 blah. And where I ultimately came down to, and where I come down to today, if you want to hear me debate the issue, is it doesn't matter whether it's technically required or not. What matters is God wants you to do it. He might want you to do a thing that's not required, but he just wants you to do it because he likes it. Because it definitely says to do it. So whether it's an outward sign of inward grace, don't care. God still wants you to do it. So are you really going to, in your defiance, say, I refuse to do this thing that God likes because I've decided it doesn't matter? No, you're getting started on the wrong foot that way, I would say. Um, and a lot of churches, this is something that I disapproved of greatly, they would save up their baptisms, for Baptism Sunday. Or if a church was doing a gospel meeting and somebody was ready to be baptized a week or two before the meeting, they wouldn't baptize the guy. They would hold it to the end of the gospel meeting. Gospel meeting is what everyone else would call a revival. At the end of one of those, they would make sure that that baptism got top billing, and they could say, you see, this revival, there were X number of baptisms. So it was worth it. Those baptisms were going to happen anyway. But they sandbagged. They waited. And it's a really weird thing from a church that believes that you will go to hell without being baptized, because, I mean, there are horror stories that we like to tell about people who, they had been taught and they just put it off and put it off, and then something happens, they're in the hospital, and now they're on their deathbed. There's this one particular story. This great Church of Christ preacher, he's talking to this man in the hospital, and he wanted to be baptized. The doctors would not let him. And there was no substitute for immersion, no pouring, no sprinkling, nothing like that. And the man died in his sins and went to hell because he waited too late. Too late. And so with attitudes like that, it's really weird that in that same denomination, rather than baptizing someone at the moment they want to be baptized, whether it's in the middle of the night or whatever, and saying, hey, we got this event coming up here. Why don't you hold off a little bit? Because they want a performance. It's a performative thing. They want a community celebration of the thing. And I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing? Holding onto this baptism. It would be as if there's a dying person and there's this great doctor coming down to do a seminar, and any doctor could do the procedure that needed to be done, but they wait until the great doctor comes, and then he administers the shot, and it makes a big news media thing. What are you doing? We're dealing with a dying person here. And so this feels like that to me. When you're traveling hundreds of miles to find a Christian to dunk you in a body of water. That we're not talking baptism anymore. We're talking something performative. There is some performance going on here. And I know I've spent all this time in this first paragraph. I haven't even finished the paragraph, but I just want you to be aware of how wrong this setup is. So forget about the physical responsibility that this preacher has here. She's also shirking the greatest spiritual responsibility by having this man wait this long and drive this far for a performative baptism that is obviously very important to these people. So I know that you've forgotten everything that I've read so far by now, so I'm just going to start it again, and we'll get through with less commentary. In October of 2023, a man named Robert Yap, also known as Robert Smith, who had Parkinson's disease, traveled hundreds of miles to Edgerton, Birmingham in England to get baptized. He had already been baptized as a young man, but the 61-year-old wanted to go through the ritual once more as a born-again believer. Man, there is a lot of discussion to be had over all that setup. Back a couple of years ago, maybe, Clint wrote his first book, Clint Heacock, and we were doing a show together. We talked about that. He was a multiple baptism person. I've got a brother who was a multiple baptism person, but me, I've always been a one and done guy. I mean, what's the use of another baptism? It's like going back to have a life-saving operation again after you've been healed and you don't need it, to do a kind of an anniversary celebration. Man, let's find some other way to celebrate. We're not going to do another triple bypass as a performance. What are you doing? So, um, but a lot of people, just so you know, it's not just a performance like a remarriage kind of thing. People want to renew their vows. I'm good with that. Um, I think it's probably time for my wife and I to do something like that. Anyway, um, yeah, I think this year will be the year. I just talked myself into it. Anyhow, a lot of people feel like their first baptism, when they were a kid, maybe wasn't so great because they didn't have the right ideas, the right motivations. They've learned so much since then, and they really want to be a born again, quote unquote, born again believer the right way. And so they feel like they are in an unsaved position. This is the sign of a church that preaches regenerative baptism. So I believe that this preacher represents a church, a branch of the cult that's much like mine was, because you actually get more people than you would expect getting dunked a second, sometimes a third time, because they start having doubts about the first time or the second time, and they want to make sure that it's right. Otherwise, they're gonna wake up in hell one day because they weren't properly baptized, all the right motives, that sort of thing. So, doing the honor was Cheryl Reed Bartley. Reed Bartley is a hyphenated name, a self-described apostle and the founder of life-changing ministries. Man, how many red flags are we looking at just in that one sentence? Apostle? Apostle. You see, because if you were actually an apostle, like the Bible has apostles, the man dies on your watch and you just be able to resurrect him. So what are you talking about, man? What are you talking about, apostle? And the name of your ministry is cringe. I know that you think that it's, a cutesy name. Life-changing ministries. That's just cringe. Um, you know how many ways there are to change a person's life? Most of them not good. Um, hmm. According to news reports from that time, Reed Bartley set up a large kiddie pool. Oh God. Um, you see, you can get a large pool or you can get a kiddie pool. A large kiddie pool is almost a contradiction in terms. Okay. They call them kiddie pools for a reason, and I suppose you could have even another category, splash pools. And, some people put little splash pools out for their big dogs to go outside and cool off, especially if they're outdoor dogs. But a large kiddie pool in the backyard of a home in the area and began live streaming the ceremony. Again, I don't understand this ceremony. You're an apostle. And you've got a church, like, or at least a ministry. You couldn't afford a building. I understand not being able to afford a building, but you couldn't afford to rent a storefront, which a lot of churches do. Um, doesn't say that she was at her home. but it was a home. Um, this man traveled hundreds of miles for a kiddie pool in somebody's backyard? Do you see how much wrong there is in this story? It makes me think, man, there's something else going on that didn't make it into the story, and that's bad too. Probably even worse if we knew all the details. But nothing about this uh, should reassure anyone. The only people who would come to something like this are people in a cult with a cult mindset. Um, I mean, what are you doing? How desensitized do you have to be to cult type behavior that you've got a friend who would invite you to a nighttime ritual and you go through some catacombs and you go in a cave and then there are candles and black lights and there are people with masks with demon horns and there's this deep thrumming music of some cross between chants and groans, and then there's instruments of torture on the walls, an Iron Maiden here, a rack there, swords dripping with something that looks like blood, and you're still okay with all of it. None of this is setting off alarm bells for you, and you wonder, wow, really? As I'm reading this story, that's what it feels like to me. It feels at some point, dude should have said, "Man, I'll pass." But we're still setting up this ritual from hell. Okay, so we're in the backyard of a home in the area and began live streaming. You see, of course, this is some kind of performance. Uh, Live streaming the ceremony, which featured a dozen spectators. How small is this ministry with a pretentious name? Nope. Still no red flags for people, huh? It was her first ever baptism. No, can this setup get worse? We're not done with this paragraph. You just keep piling on the awful. First ever baptism, the reports said. By the way, the only way they would know that is if she felt comfortable enough to say it. She's the only one who could tell them that. She supposedly submerged his head backward in the water as part of the ceremony. Okay, let me pause here and let you have a peek behind the curtain of responsible baptisms. If you can say the practice is responsible at all, it's not really. But the reason you don't hear more stories like this is because churches do tend to have some precautionary things going on. So first, the big fancy churches that believe in baptism usually have something much like a hot tub, which the water is never hot, uh, or some kind of pool-like thing uh, in the area behind the podium. They can, open up the walls and move the podium, and then have this pool thing. You don't have to be a terribly rich church to have that. That's fairly standard fare in these churches. And you have men doing it because we're misogynists, but men, and usually 2 men. So, uh, y they usually have wetsuits. So, the preacher and someone else, they don't have to strip down. They put on the wetsuit and over their clothes, and then they get into the pool. So these are things that you have, right? And the um, the one getting baptized, whether they have some kind of protected clothing on or not, is optional, but they usually don't. They're getting dunked as is. you know. So they might change into something, some swimwear or something, full T-shirt. I mean, we're not gonna be showing any midriff here. Um, so, and the reason you have two people in the water, you've got one doing the ritual. I now baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There's the person doing the procedure, but then there's a spotter just in case something goes wrong. Or if it's a great big dude, and I know that water, uh, helps make you buoyant, but if you're doing a 300 plus pounder or more, and you got to immerse them, and we don't consider immersion ducking under the water and standing up. Why not, for Pete's sake? That seems good. No, we lay them back as if, and get their arms folded in front of them, and we lay them down as if putting them um, prostrate in a coffin, because part of the symbolism is death, burial, and resurrection. So the baptism is more of the burial part, and the resurrection is kind of coming out of the water. So you die to your sins. You're buried in the watery grave of baptism. That's how we would talk about it, and rise to walk in the newness of life. All right. But we are also generally not stupid and don't want to get sued, and we don't want someone to bump their head, and we want to be able to get them out of the water. And so if you got a big gal or a big guy going down, we're not going to modify the baptism for them. We're going to get them down, and then the spotter will be there to help get them back up. All right, we have a whole nose covering thing where no one's going to be taking on water. We might have them, they're crossing their hands, their arms, kind of, but they've got one hand in front of their mouth. You probably see a gray thing going across my mouth, because this thing, when I put my hand in front of my face, it's like a gray little box in front of my face. Anyway, they hold their nose. There are ways that you get them down and up, and it's something that is practiced over time, but the younger generations get accustomed to it, because at some point, you graduate to the level of you'll be the spotter, right? So you get some experience in the pool, and then eventually, you might, on some rare occasion, get to be the baptizer. Right, so you get to do the words. You got your hand up, and you can preach a little mini sermon, and you can go, take them down and back up, and someone else will be the spotter. And so it's a way of passing down this ritual from generation to generation, and also not killing people that you're baptizing. All right, and so um, there's a lot going on with the baptism ceremony. I have baptized in church pools. I baptized in rivers. Um, you know, great big adults, small children. Uh, so I've been there. I've done that, and so I'm speaking from experience and across denominations. This is generally what you're going to see. You're going to see some version of this. What you almost never see, unless it's a small person, slip of a woman, a little kid, uh, you may lose the spotter. There's generally someone though hovering nearby, who could jump in case of emergency. But we know how to put them down in that prostrate position. We know how to take them back up. Uh, by the time you do it, it's not your first time in the water, um, assisting someone to do it. And so by the time you're kind of doing it, if you find yourself in a solo situation, it's still usually okay. You've had some practice. Right? Um, this particular baptism that they're talking about had none of that. Had none of that at all. Um, I am tempted to tell you the story of my own baptism, but nah, that's okay. Some of the time. But this had none of that. This is a kiddie pool in a backyard with a woman who seems to be herself a slip of a woman, with no spotters. Um, it's as if it's just something she's seen on television or heard of. For something like this to go so wrong, she was really bad at this. Um, so this would be a non-responsible baptism. The responsible baptisms are the ones where people get up and walk out alive. I just have to reiterate this. It's not easy to hurt somebody in a baptism as it's done in churches today. You almost have to be doing it on purpose. Whatever safety precautions they have in mind, this one had none of that. And I just want you to know the reason you don't hear these stories is because people doing the baptisms, they may be crazy about how the world works, but they've been in pools. We've all splashed around. We know what it's like to try to hold up someone who's heavier than us in a pool. They've been through practice. They usually have people around who are spotters, sometimes in the water, controlled environments. We got all that figured out. She had none of that. None of that. Okay. So she submerged his head backwards. And here I don't, the description of this, this is one where uh, I would love to ask a feedback question for Meta. If this is just a writing thing, or if he had some details about this, because you generally an immersion baptism doesn't uh, tilt a head backwards. It's like a trust fall on the part of the one being baptized, and you're the catcher, if you will, and you bring them down to so that they are, laid down and they're submerged underwater completely, and then brought back up in that position. That's why you sometimes have two people or more in the water. So that you can maintain that. But what you would never do is tilt someone's head backwards. What are you doing? I mean, you'd bring the whole body backward, but you wouldn't describe that as submerging their head backward. And so I'm just wondering if this is maybe Meta not having that same baptismal experience and just kind of writing the way he saw someone else talk about it or heard someone else talk about it, or if this is an actual thing that was going on, because that would be another talk about libel. That's a terribly dumb way to baptize someone if that's what they're doing. That's so dangerous. That takes something weird and makes it really weird. Okay. In this one paragraph here, it's a paragraph and it's also just a partial line. The man apparently drowned at some point in the process. What? The, how? And how long was this process? So here's how long you keep someone under the water when you baptize, because someone might have that question. You keep them under the water uh, only long enough to make sure that their body is fully submerged, and then you bring them back up. And why is it important to make sure the body is fully submerged? I've seen baptisms where they had to be done twice, right back to back, because someone noticed, oh, wait a minute, their nose wasn't fully under, or their elbow was still up. The hair was floating on the surface. Got to do it again. Got to get them fully submerged. Um, People who believe in water baptism generally believe it to that degree. So there's a joke that some of our um, people used to tell, and it's of this person, this woman. She had long hair, and she was baptized, and they took her up. And this did it just one time, and someone said, "Yeah, but some of her hair didn't go in the water; it's still on top of the water. Is she going to go to heaven?" And the response was, "Well, yeah, she'll still go to heaven, but she'll get to heaven bald," which is so ridiculous. While it's said as a joke, it's kind of serious too. So, um, you do have to hold them down enough to make sure you've got them completely buried, because it's a symbol of burial. You don't bury a person in the ground with their toes sticking up. That's not a good burial. That's a bad burial. Um, so the symbolism has to be complete uh, in this way. Buried is completely covered. And if you're not completely covered, then you're not buried. And the Bible says buried in baptism. It's a symbol of the burial. I'm just trying to tell you how wackadoo uh, fundies think, those who were like me. Okay, so there's no, but you wouldn't say a process. If it's long enough to call it a process, you weren't baptizing a person, you were murdering them. What the hell are you doing down there that someone could call a process? A man drowned. We make sure that the nose is thoroughly, completely covered. In fact, in the way that I learned baptism, I'll make sure that they have a hand over their nose and mouth, and I will put my hand, uh, left hand over the nose and mouth as well, right hand under their back, down, back up. We're going to make sure that they're not taking on water. Another reason why you don't hear about people drowning in baptism. More people drown in their bathtubs than who drown in baptism. I would say that it's almost impossible to drown in baptism because of all the things I've described. And yet something was going on here where we get the most ominous paragraph in the piece. The man apparently drowned at some point in the process. Holy shit. While videos of the ceremony were quickly taken down, there are versions with blurring that show him lying still in the water as others get baptized right next to him. Yeah, we got a performance going on. No one in the crowd bothered to pull him out. It's unclear if they even knew he was in there. Holy mother of fuck! What the hell? I don't even know how to picture this in my mind. The woman has put the man down. She would know if he came out. Other people are getting baptized. I mean, what does she do? Dunk him? Leave him? Go check on somebody else? Go look at somebody else and then forget he was down there? How the fuck does this happen? How do you picture it in your mind even happening? Let me just read this paragraph again. I'll try to take it down a notch. I'm sorry. And by the way, I have not clicked on the links to look at the video. The one playing in my head is bad enough. While videos of the ceremony were quickly taken down, there are versions with blurring that show him lying still in the water as others get baptized right next to him. No one in the crowd bothered to pull him out. Can we just say, it makes it sound like they see him. But they're in religious ecstasy at this point. Look at all these people coming to Jesus. Oh, and there's that man in the water. We'll leave him. The brain is not functioning correctly during times of religious ecstasy. It's unclear if they even knew he was there. A day later. Now, you think that this can't get worse. I know you do. Because that's what I was thinking by the time I got to this part of this article. It's the reason I'm reading the whole damn thing. I can't categorize it well enough. It gets worse. So if you've had enough, if it's so bad it's starting to cause you panic attacks and heebie-jeebies, bail out now. It's not going to get gory or anything like that. We're not doing blood splatter here. I think we're done with the gory bits. And yet somehow it gets worse. A day later, Reed Bartley posted another video online explaining that this was definitely not her fault. In a 45-minute video on Life Changing Ministries' public Facebook page, the church minister fights her tears as she celebrates the man's life. She says, Mr. Yap had caught a glimpse of heaven and didn't want to come back. He just passed on. Miss Reed Bartley adds, this man wanted to secure his place in heaven. The Lord had a conversation, you know. You know how baptism goes, okay? Yeah, Miss Reed Bartley, I do know how baptism goes. You know how it goes, that many people get a glimpse of heaven. Well, no, Miss Bartley, I've done many baptisms, seen many baptisms, and I have not encountered in that time anyone who got a glimpse of heaven. So no, you're making shit up here. Anyway, many people get a glimpse of heaven. You know, some come up and they see God himself. They see the Father. He, Mr. Yap, had a glimpse of heaven. This man wanted to secure salvation. She later says, I was taken to heaven instantly to see Robert Yap. He's young. He's dancing with Jesus in the garden. She's not insane at all. She's just a Christian. Right. This man feared he was going to hell if he didn't get baptized. And in the middle of the baptism, we're told he suddenly decided he wanted to go to heaven immediately. And wouldn't you know it, Reed Bartley caught up with him there during one of her visits. That's not the kind of life-changing anyone had in mind, let me just say. I know you want to do as I did and call Pastor Reed Bartley insane. But she's also following in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul, another fake apostle, who claims that he got a glimpse of heaven and maybe was there, maybe wasn't. He doesn't know, and nobody knows what shrooms he was using at the time he writes this to the Corinthians. But it is a thing that can happen to people from a New Testament perspective. So you can't just write it off as being anti-biblical. It's quite biblical. Although we don't get any biblical reports of the recently deceased dancing in the garden. Bartley Reed was initially arrested after the incident, but nothing came of it. An investigation would need to take place to understand whether this was some freak accident that no one could have seen coming, or if Reed Bartley could have done something, anything, to save his life. It appears the law enforcement is now ready to put the blame on her. Yesterday, she was officially charged with manslaughter. Joe Bartley, 48, was charged with one count of gross negligence, manslaughter, in relation to her role as a pastor during the baptism. The Crown Prosecution Service said. Malcolm McAfee, the head of the Special Crimes Division at the CPS, said, our prosecutors have worked to establish that there is sufficient evidence to bring this case to court and that it is in the public interest to pursue criminal proceedings. We have worked closely with West Midlands Police as it had carried out its investigation. This is how you know that this is not America, by the way. So never go to a court in America. She would get a call from the president saying, good work. You brought another one into heaven, and I hope you said hello to Yezu on my behalf when you were there. That's the difference between America and England here. In England, they think about it for a minute and say, yeah, something's hinky here. We probably should hold the religious person accountable. There's no accountability for religion here. It's entirely possible that Reed Bartley didn't intend for any of this to happen, but she was the one responsible for everyone's safety, and she failed to do her one job. If she's guilty, it would be deeply and morbidly ironic this this ritual, which is loaded with fictional eternal stakes, was carried out with shockingly little regard for the very real person involved. That regard meant taking charge of a ritual she'd never done before, involving a man with a serious medical condition in a backyard kiddie pool while live streaming for an audience. Where was the preparation, the oversight? There's no evidence of any wounds 24 hours later. Wait a minute. There's no evidence of any of it. They put blind trust in a God who wasn't going to protect them. And despite her wounds, her words, 24 hours later, this wasn't a spiritual success story in which the victim got a glimpse of heaven and chose not to return. This was a man's needless death, regardless of who caused it. If you if you look at Reed Bartley's social media pages, you'd never know any of this even happened. She just moved on with her life as if nothing ever happened. That must be easy to do when you assume any harm you cause is just part of God's master plan. Thank goodness this case won't be judged by religious leaders, but by secular authorities who care about evidence and accountability. Her beliefs won't shield her from responsibility this time. He could have had it, as it would in America. Instead of getting a glimpse of heaven, he got a double dose of hell. It describes people being baptized in addition to this man. But we have a kiddie pool. We don't have an ocean. We don't have a stream. We don't have a swimming pool, not really. So we got a large kiddie pool. If it's a high-walled kiddie pool, uh, I don't know. People would have had to position themselves so that they could see, is what I'm saying. They know exactly how many people would have been in the pool at that one time. I can't imagine there was room for a lot of people, even if they were attempting a mass baptism. 18 onlookers. So one of the details that I'm stuck at, let's say there were 3 people in the pool, and they all go down at similar times and 2 comes up. And nobody there says, "Hey, where's the other guy?" What? How? Okay. Because you see, this is not only your mainstream cult. Mainstream cults do this death ritual all the time. This should be enough to keep you from going there. What are we doing? Well, we're pretending to be dead, and we're pretending to get buried in the ground, you know, except it's water. What are you doing? But this scene was cultier than usual. And yet, it did not ring warning bells. And if this woman's life went on as if nothing ever happened, that means her ministry went on as if nothing ever happened. People are like, well, a man died, but not really. He just went straight to heaven. And they're thinking, man, what a lucky guy. I want to go to the garden. Maybe I should get baptized again. Holy cow. You talk about the brain rot of people on religion. Uh, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log in your Discuss account and discuss away. Send me an email, skepticsandseekers at gmail.com. Until next time, I will see you in the comments, and in the meantime, I'm out.